What's going on, guys? All right, so I'm sure by now many have heard the news that um, the health care bill that the Republicans were trying to pass failed. Right? It did not pass. They did not ultimately vote on it, but they did not have the sufficient votes for it. And in the last hour, they were not able to come up with a deal, right? And this was all in house, right? It's it was predicted that no Democrat was going to vote for this bill, right? Um, so right off the bat, before just as it was proposed, the Democrats were at the table, right? They did not include the Democrats in this health care bill because, in fairness, the Democrats are not going to work with them. They want to keep Obamacare, right? Just for many reasons. Political reasons is one of them. So right off the bat, even though they have majority, right off the bat, the minority party was off the table, right? So there was no votes there. And then why in-house? Because there was infighting within the Republican Party, right? So if anybody listened to my video where I talked about let's have an honest conversation about healthcare, I did talk about this, right? And this is an issue at different levels. So, but the issue is there are Republicans in Congress that want healthcare just in general to be out. They don't want the government involved in it whatsoever. And then there's Republicans that are willing to work with Donald Trump to give some type of a hybrid mix of no health care and some health care, right? Um, it's, in fairness, some of the provisions like pre-existing conditions, for example, were going to be kept, and whilst many things were going to change, and I think they would have been damaging, I think it would have been terrible. I think many people would have lost their health care. But my opinion aside, the infighting was a mixture of Republicans that are principled, meaning that they just don't believe the government should be involved with healthcare, and they genuinely believe that if healthcare was not in our system, the government system anyway, that everybody will be better off because the government just makes everything worse, right? That's the belief they share, which to me is it's a little more nuanced than that. And then you have, of course, and to keep it real, Republicans that are bought off by the Koch brothers, and the Koch brothers did not want this bill. Now, technically, it was better for them, this bill, right? But the Koch brothers, okay, like they just want more. So let's put it this way. Um, if ever asked me, hey, you think Trump is just as bad as like some of these Republicans? And I always say, well, no, he's not. He's not as bad. There's some Republicans that I believe um, are worse. Maybe they speak better, maybe they sound better. But just overall. So this is an example of it. So while the health bill was terrible, thing I'll tell you that much, and the Koch brothers want people to have nothing. All right, they don't. They thought this Trump healthcare bill was too liberal, and they helped sabotage this healthcare bill. It was not the Democrat. They didn't need the Democrats to pass this bill. For those that don't understand this, the Democrats were not needed. I mean, if you would have had some, and any other bill, you want some bipartisan, just you want to be bipartisan in order to have some people on board, right? To give yourself more cushion. But in this bill, they did not need the Democrats. The Democrats were just voting to keep Obamacare, basically. So of course, we're going to vote against it. But there was Republicans that are bought out by the Koch brothers that were not going to vote on this bill for opposite reasons of the Democrats. As weird as that sounds, like they were both voting no, but for different reasons. Pretty much, right? Now, yes, I mean, technically speaking, the Koch brothers could have gotten, I believe it was like a $1 to $2 million tax break every year if this was repealed, right? I mean, they would have, but to the Koch brothers that are billionaires, this is nothing. Like they donate way more than that to campaign contributions. That's small money to them. They want to save even more than that, so they want to get rid of any government involvement. Okay, it's basically an ideology thing. They don't want the government involved in things, right? That they believe should belong to the private sector. Because once the government does that, then they're going to start getting involved in their industry too. That's basically what it is. Um, so to them, this was just Republican light. So let's say, I'm sorry, Obamacare light. So let's say you don't drink, right? And Obamacare is Budweiser. Donald Trump comes around and he offers you Bud Light. Sure, it's the light version, but you still don't drink. You don't want the beer, right? And that's basically what happened here, right? Now, and then there was also a segment of Republicans that live in that are very poor. For those that don't know, about 95% of poor counties vote Republican for whatever reason, right? Which is strange because Republicans are always talking about the takers, and you always hear Republicans talk about liberals being the takers and this, that, and the third. I mean, what are you going to do? Okay. Um, so I had the numbers up here. Apologize. I lost them. Anyway, um, so given the fact that they were getting hounded on um, at town halls with people that were misled for years that Obamacare was bad, but Medicaid expansion was good, when it's the same exact fucking thing, right? Um, Once people realize that, it's I think it their constant lying for over 7 years now caught up to them, and politically it was going to be these congressmen. I mean, they run every 2 years. I mean, it would have been political suicide running while there's in very poor areas where people are either going to be taken off their health care. Oh, I mean, if you make less than 30,000 a year, I mean, you're paying about $70 for healthcare under Obamacare. I mean, that's nothing. They're not going to pay that anymore if they get rid of Obamacare. So of course, those people, once it dawned on them, that holy shit. Oh, so that's what Obamacare was, right? I mean, the term Obamacare was a term that everybody uses it now, but the Affordable Care Act was called Obamacare to give it a negative connotation by Republicans. Republicans tried to repeal Obamacare almost unanimously within all the Republicans in the House. It always passed, right? I don't know. I forgot how many times, like 40 some times, or probably more than that. Um, I don't have the figure in front of me, but a ridiculous amount of times when they knew it was not going to pass the Senate because the Democrats control the Senate for a majority of those years. Um, and even if it did pass the Senate, Obama was going to veto it. He wasn't going to repeal his own bill, right? And then when the time comes, when they have control of the Congress still, when they have control of the Senate, and when they have a president that's a Republican, they didn't do it. In the when it mattered, they didn't do it. Okay, in practice, they did it right. Or in practice, when there was no consequences, when it was just a political, move. When I mean these motherfuckers shut down the government. All right, they shut down the government to make a political point about repealing Obamacare. Ted Cruz stood, all right, in the House floor talking for almost 20 hours, okay, reading story about kids and shit, and about breakfast and ham or some bullshit like that, to quote unquote try and repeal Obamacare, to filibuster it, which wasn't really a filibuster, but They shut down the government, right? And I know family members that work for the federal government. It impacted them big, right? I mean, the congressmen that the Congress that shut down the government. I mean, they still had the gym open to exercise and stuff, which is paid by taxpayer money. They still got their money, right? Even their donor money. That didn't stop. But a bunch of federal workers didn't get a paycheck for a couple of weeks, fell behind on bills. But here it is. The hour came, and they failed to repeal it. I mean, that's the reality. That's what happened. And the reason they failed is because the guy that ran for president knows that people don't want it repealed fully, right? He wanted to change it and have it called Trumpcare now and something like that, but it was still government law, right? I mean that's the it was still going to be government involvement in it. So there's some Republicans that want to repeal it altogether and leave it at that, and then but the majority of people want that are Republicans want it repealed and replaced, and there is a conflict between those two sides, and because of that, they were not able to repeal Obamacare. Now, that's just the way it is, right? If they couldn't do it now, I don't see when they'll do it. I just don't. I mean, and as much as I hate the Koch brothers, right? I do, but you got to give them credit for standing by their principles, right? Right. It's they could have just said, "Well, we still hate it, but at least we get a $2 million tax break," and just tell their puppets to just go ahead and vote for it. But no, they stood their ground. They said, "No, we're going to repeal the whole thing." That's what they want. They want to repeal the whole enchilada. They don't want government involvement whatsoever. They don't want Obamacare light. They don't want any Obamacare, right? And that's basically what this was. There was some protection, but just not enough, in my opinion. But there was some. So it was better than nothing. I'll say that. Okay, what Trump proposed was better than nothing. Okay, that I could say. But it was definitely worse than Obamacare. So for what it's worth. Can Obamacare be improved? Absolutely, it could be improved. But we're not going to get an improvement with all this bickering going on because way too many factions want different things. Some don't want it around at all. Okay, some, and when it comes to healthcare, it's in this country anyway. We're relatively new to it, so we are in an experiment age right now. We're experimenting with it. Um, it's inevitable that it's eventually going to lead to universal healthcare, but as of right now, this is what we have. Right? So there you go. It didn't pass. Now, what about everything else? What about everything else? Tax reform. I think they'll be able to pass tax reform. I believe. I think the Koch brothers are going to want more than what Trump's going to propose, but they can't say no to everything. I mean, at some you want to gain something out of this Trump presidency, right? If you're the Koch brothers, you don't want to leave empty-handed because what if he loses the next election and you don't get shit? You know what I mean? So at some point, and with tax reform, I mean, people are already paying taxes, so I think they will possibly pass tax reform. But I will say this: that Republicans are they're very divided right now. So tax reform may reunite them, but there is some other issues, man. Like the wall. The wall's going to be. I think it's going to fall under. It's going to have the same problem Obamacare had, right? Same problems that Obamacare had. People need to understand. There's a lot of Republicans in Texas that do not want the wall because they know it wouldn't work, right? So and I'm not talking just an average dude. I'm talking about like people in the Texas legislature, right? I mean, it's not like they don't want the wall. There's cities, border cities, that don't want the wall. Like they just don't want it. It doesn't work. It's a waste of money, waste of resources. But in Washington, if they pass it, they pass it. But the trouble that Trump is going to have in Washington is the following. Number one, no Democrats going to vote for it. So right out the bat, just like in this bill, he's going to have no support for that. I'll tell you right now, for tax reform, there's going to be some, not a lot of them, but trust me, 2 or 3 makes a big difference of Democrats that are going to, they have they're corporate puppets too. So that's why tax reform is going to pass. Okay. But as far as the wall, no Democrats going to vote to fund the wall. Okay, it's not going to happen. All right, it's going to be political suicide. And then on top of that, there's Republicans that just don't want the wall. Like they're open about it. It's not like they're against it in secret, right? And it's not like they say no wall. They always say, well, I mean, maybe he means a barrier, or it's like a fence or something like that. It's going to have a lot of problems passing. It's a lot of problems getting past that wall. And you need the funding for it to make the wall, right? You could do all the executive orders you want, but if you don't have the funding for it, then how are you going to make it? And if hopefully by now, if you guys think that Mexico is going to pay for it, then at this point, I don't know what to tell you, right? Well, Trump's going to make it happen. Well, he didn't make this Trumpcare happen, right? A lot of shit is starting to unravel before your eyes, right? It's just like he couldn't make the Koch brothers say, okay, we'll take it. He's not going to make Mexico pay for a wall, right? He needs Congress, and he's going to have to get taxpayer money to pay it, all right? So how is he going to do that? There's Republicans that don't want the wall. They just don't, you know what I mean? Like, and then on top of all that, whether they're, regardless of how they feel on immigration, look, man, there's a lot of Republicans in Congress. Their donors love illegal immigration labor, right? So it's they're not going to say that, okay? But that's just the way it is, right? That's the reality. That's the truth. Now there's going to be some other ones, right? The wall it's. I'll give you this. It's not probable, but it's possible. NAFTA getting overturned, not a shot, right? Not a shot in hell. Now Trump did the right thing by just killing, you know, the last fucking trade bill. What the fuck was it called? Not NAFTA, but TPP. There we go. TPP. You know how I remember TPP? I remember that lingo. Like, you down with TPP? Yeah, you know me. So TPP. He killed, which is great. But make no mistake about this. And again, I said this, right? I don't just say them. Like, when I say it, this health bill is probably not going to pass because there's infighting within Republicans, and they're going to vote no for different reasons than the Democrats, but they're going to vote no. Well, there you go. So when I talk about the wall, like I'm just telling you that's how it works. When I tell you Mexico's not going to pay for it, like I'm just telling you that they're not going to pay for it. But when it comes to TPP, like I said, I give them credit for getting rid of it, but it's reemerging. They just renamed the thing. It's reemerging again, right? And I always warn people that Trump is a very vague person, and if he just says something like, "Well, I renegotiated the deal, and now it's far better." I mean, there's just great things, and you ask him for details, and he'll just say, "Oh, just believe me. It's great. It's going to be great, right? It's going to create jobs. It's going to be great." Never goes into detail, which is problematic. But also convenient because his supporters are okay with that. Okay, so he just goes along with it. It's reemerging under a different name, so there's no doubt in my mind that TPP may very well, under a different name, still be passed, right? And the reason is because a lot of these Republican donors want it to pass. TPP was like the only reason. There's only one reason it did not pass under Obama. One, that's it. Because it was unpopular as a Republican to work with Obama on anything, right? That's why they wouldn't even fucking pass. It wasn't until the 11th hour in December that finally Congress authorized to fund a couple $1 million to Flint, Michigan, to clean the water. Right? I mean, it's insane. But just working with Obama was political suicide. You know, it's but the Republican donors, however, wanted TPP. Paul Ryan was working behind the scenes with Obama to get TPP passed. Right? They were going to do it very hushly. Not because it's a big conspiracy. I mean, Obama's real open about it. He's like TPP, you know me, like rapping about it on fucking, uh, late night shows and shit. But the Republicans have to be hush hush because it's not popular to pass something with Obama. That's the only reason. And I'm very thankful that it didn't pass because it's a terrible deal, right? But it's under a different name, under a different disguise. It could still pass. All right, so I'll be on the lookout for that, and everybody else should too. Okay, and do your research. Search what TPP is. Okay, search the new name for it, and you'll see how it's coming back up. As far as NAFTA, so my final point. Look, man, NAFTA. Number one, NAFTA was passed as a big bipartisan agreement, meaning both the corporate Democrats and the Republicans are really behind this, right? In fact, this was in an age where presidents are worried about their legacy. This was a legacy move by Clinton, right? Every president wants that legacy move where they worked with the other side of the aisle and worked at, they were bipartisan and put politics aside and did what was best for the American people. That's a bill that every president at some point wants to pass, right? Um, but that was Clinton's. It was he was able to pass NAFTA, which was a wet dream of Republicans in the 80s that a Democratic Congress would not allow. But under Clinton, right, it was quote unquote bipartisan, but the reality is it was politics because the Democrats were all against it, were all of a sudden for it because it was a Democratic president that was passing it. So and that's what could happen with TPP and Donald Trump. The same shit, right? So as far as NAFTA goes, these Republican donors and these corporate Democrat donors, they don't want to repeal NAFTA. Are you kidding me? They don't want to repeal NAFTA. It's a bigger problem on the Republican side, to be honest with you. And then with the Democrats, they're not going to vote with anything with Trump anyway, right? He's always going around calling them losers and this, that, and the third. You think they're going to work with him? No. Okay, like um, if we're honest and if we're fair to Trump, right? Democrats are going to do the same thing to him that Republicans did to Obama. They're not going to work with him whatsoever. Because if you think about it, it's the same for a Democrat. If they're caught working with Trump, that could be political suicide from their end, just like it was for Republicans. That's just the state of our politics. Okay, so Democrats are not going to vote with you out of spite. And in politics, you can find any reason. So let's say he tries to get rid of NAFTA, right? I mean, the Democrats will call it like this is just going to benefit the rich, and they'll try and push provisions that benefit, or are perceived, or however you want to say it, to help middle class people or poor people. And obviously, the Trump administration is going to be pressured to say no out of their side of things with the Republicans, and you're going to have Republicans that the donors are saying no, we're not going to pass this. If you vote for this, we're not going to fund you anymore because you're my puppet, not Donald Trump's. Okay, so it's the Koch brothers and like all these extremely wealthy Republican donors and in fairness and donors of the Democrats as well. They do not want NAFTA to be repealed. And the worst part for Trump is he's not a popular president. So there's no pressure to go against him. None. Right? There's no like the reason Obamacare passed was because was Obama at that time was in 2009. Yeah, he was very popular. He had a very high approval rating, and even some, and like there was, as a Democrat, you couldn't vote against him. So of course they voted for him. You know what I mean? Regardless, and he controlled, the Senate at the time, and I believe he controlled the Congress. I'm not sure about that, but it was pretty tight. But anyway, I don't think NAFTA's not going to get overturned. And people think like it's not like Trump could just do it on his own. Like he has to he needs Congress for this, And it's also an agreement with Mexico and Canada. There's a lot of layers to this. And the Canadian government doesn't like Trump. The Mexican government doesn't like Trump. Nobody likes Trump. Okay, so nobody wants to work with the guy. All right, I mean that's just the reality. All that bravado talk and all this America first talk. Well, then Canada's going to say, well, fine. Well, Canada first. Mexico's going to say, okay, fine, Mexico first. Everybody's going to start saying, okay, our country first then. Nobody's going to want to work with us. And we've got to work with people. Like we're 5% of the world's population. We got to work with people, right? And we have a lot of problems right now, but I don't think NAFTA is going to get overturned. The only way NAFTA will ever be overturned is with a progressive president, a progressive Congress, and a progressive Senate. That's it. That's the only way it's ever going to get overturned, right? Or repealed, whatever you want to call it. Okay, that's the only way NAFTA goes away. NAFTA only exists because of the donors. That's it. It's corporate Democrat donors, corporate Republican donors. That's why NAFTA exists. It was in the Clinton age, and this is why I tell people you may wonder, why did the Koch brothers force their little puppets to vote against Trump in this healthcare bill? Because if you kind of know how politics works, right? When President Clinton, all right, when he was president and he wanted to pass NAFTA to be bipartisan or whatever, maybe NAFTA wasn't 100% what the Republicans wanted, okay? But it was more than enough. It was more than enough. So to the Koch brothers, it's the same thing, right? It's like the analogy I gave you. Maybe it's not Budweiser, but it's Bud Light, and we don't want it. So you gotta give them some credit for being principled, right? I mean, I think that the Koch brothers are atrocious people. I think they're terrible people, but you got to give them brownie points for being consistent, right? Tax reform will pass, right? And then there's going to be a lot of things that will pass, but a lot of the major promises Trump made, aside from tax reform, I believe are going to have a lot of problems passing. A lot. And I mean, keep in mind, right now he has Republican control. I just never in my wildest dreams, never would I have thought that a Republican president that was popular amongst Republicans would not be able to pass a bill in House and a Republican Senate. That is mind-boggling. That is insane. I mean, I don't even know what to say to that other than he's going to have a lot of problems with a lot of shit. Okay. They're not going to be condemning Trump on the right, with the Republicans, but there's going to be a lot of distancing themselves from Trump. A lot of these congressmen are going to be around for 20 years in the Congress. Okay, it's these next 4 years or even 8 years are a short-term thing they got to deal with. The donors, they got to deal with that forever, forever. Right. So there you go. This is D style. Tell me what you think, and I'm out.